He wasn't blonde. He didn't have blue eyes. And if you had walked the dusty streets of Galilee 2,000 years ago, you would not have recognized the Jesus of Western art. There's a forgotten story buried beneath centuries of paintings, political power, and pale-faced depictions. A story that stretches from the deserts of Egypt to the highlands of Ethiopia. A story etched in ancient scrolls, whispered in early Christian writings, and painted on the crumbling walls of Nubian monasteries. It begins not in Rome, but in Africa. After Herod's deadly decree, as the Gospel of Matthew tells us, Joseph fled with Mary and the infant Jesus not north, not east, but south, into Egypt, into Africa. Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt. Matthew 2:13. This journey wasn't symbolic, it wasn't poetic, it was real. A desperate escape through the harsh desert terrain into the African continent, where Jesus, still a child, would find refuge among people whose skin was dark like the soil, like the Nile after flood season. Egypt was not a place of strangers. It had a vast Jewish diaspora, vibrant temples, and libraries filled with scrolls, written in Greek, Coptic, and Aramaic. But it was also deeply African. And here, in this cradle of black civilization, the child Jesus would live for years. We are told nothing of his appearance during this time, but what we do know raises uncomfortable questions. The earliest icons of Jesus long before the Renaissance tell a very different story. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, among the oldest Christian traditions on earth, Jesus has always been depicted with rich brown skin, coiled hair, and African features. Not because of political correctness, but because that's what they believed was true. In the catacombs of Rome, 2nd and 3rd century paintings, those untouched by the later Western canon, depict Christ as a short-haired man with dark or olive skin. The Coptic Church in Egypt preserved images of a Jesus that looked indistinguishable from the surrounding population, dark-skinned, thick-lipped, and black-eyed. Even more astonishing are the writings of early church fathers, Tertullian of Carthage, Origen of Alexandria, Clement, all African theologians, all pivotal in shaping Christian doctrine. And yet, in most Western histories, they're rarely discussed as African thinkers. Why? Because acknowledging Africa's role in Christianity requires rethinking the image of Jesus himself. In the Acts of the Apostles, an Ethiopian court official, possibly a Jew or a Jewish convertus, baptized by Philip. This Ethiopian eunuch was one of the first recorded converts to Christianity. This is not coincidence. It's a clue. Christianity's earliest spread was deeply connected to African soil. Long before Europe adopted the cross, it was the symbol of the Nubians, the Egyptians, and the Axumites. By the 4th century, the kingdom of Axum, modern-day Ethiopia, and Eritrea declared Christianity its state religion. That's nearly 60 years before Constantine's Edict of Milan. What does this tell us? That the Christianity of Jesus' teachings, his travels, and possibly even his bloodline had roots far closer to Africa than we've been led to believe. But there's more. In Revelation 1:14-15, the author, often believed to be John, describes a vision of Christ. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like bronze, glowing in a furnace. White like wool, feet like burning bronze. Wool, bronze. This passage has sparked centuries of debate. Was it metaphor, or was it a veiled description of something the author could not plainly say? According to the 2020 BBC documentary, The Face of Jesus, forensic anthropologists recreated the likely features of a man living in 1st century Galilee. The result? A short, dark-skinned man with coarse, curly hair bearing almost no resemblance to the pale, elongated face of European portraits. Their findings were based on actual skulls from that region and era. Not speculation, not theology, science. Even Tacitus, the Roman historian, described Jews of the time as resembling Ethiopians and Egyptians more than Romans. And remember, Jesus was a Jew. How then did the Western world come to embrace a white Jesus. Enter the Renaissance. In 1490s Europe, the Catholic Church and the emerging powers of the West needed an image of God that mirrored their own dominance. Enter Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and a host of others who would recast Jesus in the image of European nobility. Their brushstrokes became gospel, their canvases unquestioned. One of the most widely circulated images, the pale, blue-eyed Christus, believed to be modeled after Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI. It was political propaganda cloaked in holiness, and over time it became the accepted image of divinity. But not everywhere. In the walls of Debre Berhan Selassie Church in Ethiopia, Jesus is still dark-skinned. In Nubian ruins along the Nile, he is painted with black features. In ancient Syriac manuscripts, he is described with olive or darker complexions. And in the oral traditions of African communities, passed down through generations, Jesus is not European. He never was. This isn't just about skin color. It's about historical truth, about reclaiming a narrative that was colonized like so many others. And it goes deeper. Many scholars now believe that Jesus' family through Mary may have had ancestral ties to African lineages. Some even connect the genealogy in Matthew 1 to Ruth the Moabite, Tamar the Canaanite, and Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, the Hittite all-women, with possible African or Semitic roots. Jesus, by blood, was not from a pure European line, because such a line never existed in the first place. What if the real scandal isn't whether Jesus had dark skin, but that we ever imagined he didn't? This raises larger questions. If the Son of God was a brown-skinned man who lived among Africans, learned in Egyptian temples, and spoke languages rooted in Semitic and Coptic dialects, did we end up with a Jesus who looks like a Roman emperor? If early Christianity flourished in Alexandria, Cyrene, and Axumwai, are these places footnotes in modern theology? If Jesus walked with the oppressed, the poor, the exiled, what does it mean when we dress him in gold robes and ivory skin? Maybe the truth isn't lost. Maybe it's just been hidden. So the next time you see that familiar painting of the pale-skinned Jesus with flowing hair and gentle eyes, ask yourself, whose Jesus is that? Because the Jesus who walked into Egypt, who spoke to the Samaritan woman, who healed the daughter of a Canaanite woman, and who died in the blazing sun outside Jerusalem, may have looked far more like the people we've been taught to forget. And perhaps that's why the truth still stings. There are scrolls still sealed, frescoes still buried in desert sands, oral traditions still waiting to be heard. What else has history hidden from us about the people and places who shaped faith? Could the earliest disciples have carried African blood? Could ancient Nubian monks have preserved gospels we've never read? And what of the stories passed down in Ethiopia, where some believe the Ark of the Covenant still rests protected by those who never forgot the color of their Messiah? This is just the beginning. History is not flat. It's layered, living, and waiting to be rediscovered. So if you're ready to uncover more hidden truths, if you're willing to walk off the map, then subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Leave a comment below. What did this story make you question? Because the past isn't behind us. It's buried beneath our feet. And we've only just begun to dig.